with globalization through the internet, and then the more that people around the globe have access to the internet, everyone has a creative capacity within them. Mm-hmm. And it's just about tapping into that and finding out like what aligns with you creatively. And there's so many musicians on the planet, and it's amazing that they can all put their stuff online and everyone can find a community or have like some people that come to them and like vibe with what they do and love what they do, and everyone can contribute what the special gift that they have to offer.
All right, so welcome back to Step Into The Sandbox. I'm really excited to bring in a good friend of mine, Nik Olas. We've known each other since we were teenagers, maybe a little bit younger. Locally here in Miami at Belen Summer Camp. Mm-hmm. Nik, for background, is a musician. He's been a musician for all his life. We'll talk a little bit about his family background and how those influences came through. He's multifaceted. He's been kind of exploring a lot of new areas more recently in his career. And so I'll let him introduce himself and kind of get into some of his craft.
Hey, hello. I've always wanted to be on a podcast. Finally, this is happening. This is cool. Yeah, I'm Nik. I go by Nik Olas. It's a lot easier than Nicolás Balseiro. So, my Instagram bio says that I'm a healer, songwriter, musician, performer, improviser, producer. These are all labels that just generally blanket over the things that I feel come through me when I'm doing my craft. But I guess just music. I am a musicer. That's what I do. Music has been this amazing journey of just listening, growing up and listening to like Spanish music, Latin music from my mom's side, and a lot of like old school Motown. And then my dad's a guitarist, and he always played, like, his favorite thing was funk. So literally like playing funk tunes, and he loves the Beatles also, the harmonies. So just all this like tasty, groovy, delicious, harmonious music. And then I was a huge, I love video games, and growing up that was my like creative outlet. And video games have tremendous music. And from like Super Mario soundtrack, which is a lot of like jazz and swing, to Legend of Zelda, which is a lot of orchestral and classical. And then you have like Sonic the Hedgehog, which is all like R&B and funk and groove. And so like all of these different genres were just like, it just showed me that there's so much that music can be, and it's amazing. So I picked up a guitar when my dad started. My dad's always been doing it, but when I was in 10th grade, I was like 15. I picked it up and I started learning. And just from then I started writing songs, and I was always in a band up until like 2018. And sometimes I was in two bands. Sometimes the band went on tour. It was a fantastic journey. Really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so let's get into a little bit of your background, your parents, your father specifically being a musician. What did your mother do growing up, or what was kind of like your experience with both of them?
So like when I was growing up, like what? Yeah. My mom, shout out, hi mom, is a beautiful human, amazing mother, so loving and supportive, always smiling, always like coming up with cool activities and fun things to do, and like hosting friends at the house, and she'd like always chaperone at like the field trips and stuff.
Yeah.
And always in the car just like listening to good music and like Gypsy Kings, like Elvis Crespo. And like I remember like one of my oldest memories was being in the car, and for whatever reason like the song Michelle by the Beatles came on, and I think I was like 3 or something. It might be one of my oldest memories, and I was like, Mom, put that song back on. There was just something haunting about it that like I felt deep inside that was like, I need to hear that again. There's something beautiful about this music, about these harmonies. And so it's cool to like think back to moments when like I guess that internal fire in me of like the craft that I came here for was kind of like called to attention.
Yeah.
And my dad and mom met at one of my dad's gigs. Like my mom would go out with her friends and go dancing, and my dad's band would always be playing funk and disco, and my mom was a disco dancer in the 70s.
So were my parents,
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. And they just met that way, and when I was really little, like you'd see me at the club, like in my mom's arms with like earplugs protecting me from the sounds, and
That's
like
funny.
just like growing up seeing my dad playing in these clubs and just being around this amazing live music and the way that it moved people literally and like made them feel amazing.
Yeah. So what's been your experience with live music here in Miami? Because you've seen it kind of grow over the years. And I'm sure you've traveled to other places to see live music or be a part of live music going on tour.
Mm-hmm.
So what's kind of been your take on it and from growing up to where it is now?
Yeah. Well, my earliest understanding, I mean, when I was really little, I didn't really have a concept or a grasp on it. But there was always live music everywhere. There was always like bands. Like I remember my dad's band playing in like the middle of Cocoa Walk on a weekend, and like just I have like my mom has like VHS tapes of me like shaking my butt as like a 2-year-old barely standing and just like dancing there. But like growing up, I remember in high school, it was in Kendall, like Cafe Cristal.
Wow.
You know that spot?
I've heard of it, yeah.
And there were some punk bands and ska bands, like in high school, like ska, like, and it was a great time. And just, there was like that scene. And then when I got into college and started kind of seeing the spots like Tobacco Road, there was a place downtown called The Stage.
Yep.
Open Stage Club in Coral Gables. These are the ones that are popping up to me. Of course, Churchill's.
Yeah.
These are like staples, and the scene. It's interesting because there's always a good time. That no doubt about that. But what I would say has changed is maybe the way that people treat musicians or respect, because it was like kind of fighting for your worth back then. And also I feel like people in arts and culture have an issue with that in general, because society has this kind of suggestion that's pretty deeply ingrained that the arts and culture are not of equal value to being like a doctor or a lawyer or a business person. And therefore like if you're gonna play at this event, we're not gonna pay you, but like it's great exposure, right?
Yeah.
And that's like one of the most devaluing things you can give to an artist, and just say, but other people will see it, and then that will,
help you.
Right? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
And then when you have like Spotify and Apple Music coming out, which is, I love that music is so accessible. I think that that's how it should be. But when you have that shift, now you have like one less avenue for people to make like legit money, because you're making like fractions of pennies for
Streaming.
like one listen. And so if you're not like Rihanna or Beyonce or anybody that actually has like millions of listens, you're not really going to make any money. Yeah. I get a check from Sun Ghosts, this band that I was in that did very well locally. I get a check annually for like $50 from royalties, and I'm like, yay! I'm grateful. I mean, it's $50, but I'm like, this is not putting food on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's tough to sustain.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I've personally seen that the scene has grown.
Yeah,
and I think when you travel to other cities that have a really good scene like Nashville and other metropolitan areas that have,
there's a lot of respect and admiration.
I remember going to Nashville, and you go to any bar and there'll be artists that were once contestants on other shows that have bands or are on the rise, and they're just doing a gig there because of how much the area kind of like respects and wants that as part of like the cultural scene. So I think that's starting to happen in Miami. And like everything else, Miami's always late to the party. So I think that we'll see maybe in the next handful of years that it'll start developing kind of like what those other cities are doing. But it's great to see that you, as an artist yourself, as a musician, are starting to experience it firsthand. Yeah.
Well, and también, just to say, like, I haven't really been in the scene since like 2017, 2018.
Correct.
Like things started happening in my life that that took me away from that. And so then with the lockdown in 2020, it just everything really changed. Correct. So I'm not sure what the scene's like now. I've been to a couple shows and they've been great, like at what's the place, the Ground, which is
the Space.
Yeah, Space. That was absolutely wonderful. Saw my friends the Hales and Polar Boys, and that was a beautiful show. Shout out.
we had some guests were Freaks Design Co. Gabby and Val, that they designed the entire identity for Polar Boys.
Cool.
So they do the merch and they do a bunch of stuff. So they're really close to them, and it's been cool to see that connection and listening to their music as well. As they're really good people.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to get a little bit more into the craft side of things.
Yeah.
You said you picked up a guitar when you were
15. Yeah.
So what was that like, and how has your ritual of playing guitar changed over the years?
Beautiful. So my musical like output didn't start with guitar, but my parents have a Wurlitzer it's a upright piano that like they got for like $100 at a garage sale like back in the day. And so growing up, like 2 or 3, when I could like climb up onto the bench, I just like lift the piano hood and just go to town. I remember like one of the earliest exercises that I would do was playing and holding a note with my left hand on the lower notes, and then with the right hand playing like a little melody, and then changing the note on the left and then continuing the melody. And it just came naturally. And like when I think back to it, I'm like, wow, that's pretty phenomenal that this 3-year-old was like, let me try this, which is actually playing piano, like just and understanding harmony and like but it was when I started playing guitar, and the guitar was spurred by multiple things, like mainly a couple friends when I was 15 that were playing guitar and were really into rock music, and I looked up to them and I thought they were really cool and I wanted to be cool. So that was kind of like my strange like fake way of getting into music, but then realizing, oh shit, no, I fucking love this. This is my thing. Like this is what I need. And it started off with like learning Red Hot Chili Peppers songs and attempting to play Mars Volta because I absolutely loved them, and System of a Down, and just Mute Math, just a couple names I'm dropping. But then I always wanted to be a video game designer, and I went looking for colleges, and at the time what I wanted to do was be like the head of the like game, like I wanted to be the game designer, the one with the idea. Yeah. Like that's what I did as a kid. I had a bunch of like the composition notebooks filled with game ideas. You remember at summer camp, I'd be like, yo, let's make a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game, and we draw the characters, I draw the levels out. Like I just love like mapping the whole thing out. Yeah. And when I went to a couple schools and they're like, oh yeah, the game design program we have is like 3D animation or 3D modeling. I'm like, I don't want to do that. That's not what I want. Yeah. And there was nothing for this other aspect. So
like game architecture, essentially.
And at that same time, I was already starting to play guitar, and something that I loved was the accessibility and the quickness of like getting that creative flow, writing a song and just letting it kind of like write itself and just come right out. And boom, there's a song. I don't have to wait 4 or 5 years like of putting a game together and getting designers and this and that. And I'm like, I feel like my ADHD would not have allowed for that. Like that's a long-term commitment. And I think that like the bite-sized quality of songs really worked. And I just started writing and started using GarageBand on my dad's like old ass iMac. And then they gifted me like Ableton one year. And then the next year they gifted me Logic. And just from then, like I just continued to write. And I was always in a band, and I was always writing all the songs, sometimes all the parts. And like, oh man, it just kind of all unfolded from there. I know we didn't really get into the craft. I gave you like
but that's exactly what it's, kind of like understanding where it started, where it stemmed from, and some of the experiences that you've kind of had to build what you now use as part of your, what your output essentially.
I can say about craft, or at least where music comes from for me. It's always been more about feeling. Like, how do I feel? What is this song that I want to bring out? And most of the time I'm like sitting on the guitar, not on it, sitting with the guitar. And I'm just playing. And something goes, oh, I like this little thing I just played. That's catchy. Like, and I feel like a little pull, like magnetism. I start playing it more, I develop it more, and I'll start singing gibberish over it. Like, the words don't always come like right away. Sometimes within the gibberish, and I record a voice memo, there'll be like one sentence, and I'm like, that random thing that came through me actually sounds really good, and all the lyrics flow from that one sentence.
Yeah.
And like the melody is there in the gibberish, and like the song just starts to like flesh itself out. It's coming out of nothing and into the fog, and then like the fog clears and there's this like finished product. Yeah. And it's just about like getting out of the way for that to happen. And one thing, especially on like a more in like a spiritual perspective of what I do, I've held this perspective for a while, that the music or anything that I create is not mine. I didn't create it. I'm just a channel. In the same way that an instrument, like if you're holding, let's say a djembe, you have a drum. Do you play the drum and then someone says, wow, that drum played some awesome music? No, you're like, oh, the person playing the drum played awesome music. Well, in my beliefs, there's something that's flowing through me, and I am the instrument that's playing this music.
Yeah.
And when I can tap into that, then my ego gets out of the way and stops like judging what I'm doing in the moment, like, oh, you made a mistake. And then like, and I've had so many issues like that, like, oh, I'm on stage, there's so many people watching, and like, oh, this girl's cute, she's looking at me, and like, I want to make a good impression, and oh, my entire family's here, and I just made a mistake, and it just like ruins everything. But like, when you're really in the moment and you're like, oh no, like I'm doing this is just coming through me, like I don't have to worry, like that's when it just happens.
That's really interesting, because I think that's an aspect that we don't really talk about, which is kind of catching your flow and finding that focus while you're in your craft. Mm-hmm. And for me, it could be kind of like setting aside these 2 hours where I know I'm going to design, and I'm going to just be focused on sketching, or I'm going to be focused on finding inspiration that then leads to, you know, building a concept that I could actually develop into a brand or develop into a final design. But for you, it's interesting because there's a lot more, people around you, especially not when you're just, doing a session with your crew or by yourself, but it's like when you're on stage now, it's a much more public situation. So you have to find another way to ground yourself, and you have to find another way to stay focused. So I think that's always interesting to hear your perspective on how that works for you, and what are the kind of things that go through your mind to keep you in that zone. Mm-hmm. So I think what we can jump into now is more about like the inspiration points. We talked a little bit about your parents mm-hmm. and the kind of music that they exposed you to and that you kind of drew from. Are there any kind of inspiration points that maybe are outside of your family mm-hmm. that really started building your identity when it comes to music or your taste?
A big one for me, definitely, I've already mentioned, like video game music. Just composers Koji Kondo, who did Super Mario and the Zelda series, Nobuo Uematsu, who did all the most of the meat and potatoes of the Final Fantasy series, Yoko Shimomura, who did Kingdom Hearts and some of the more recent Final Fantasy games. Just like some of the best composed music I've ever heard in my life. And there's something beautiful about soundtrack music where it's like, hey, this piece doesn't exist solely for its own sake, but as it serves a function, like merging with this movie or this game, where it's like, oh, here's an emotion that's happening in the story of this game, and if you had no music, you wouldn't really feel that emotion as deeply.
Correct.
And just with the music, like that music is like the non-verbal, like it's just such a beautiful art form to mirror emotion when you're trying to portray that, and it's just fascinating. So video game music for sure. The Red Hot Chili Peppers. I always like, if people are like, oh, what's your favorite band? Do you have a number one? And I have the tattoo on my wrist of the Star of Infinity that John Frusciante, the guitarist, and the lead singer Anthony Kiedis have on their wrist. And I remember reading Scar Tissue, Anthony Kiedis' autobiography, and that really like affecting me. And there's something about their music and their path and seeing how, you know, they all live like pretty rough lives, and that music was the thing that saved them and healed them, and also their music healed so many people and brought so many people together. Like, I love looking at a Chili Peppers concert and seeing the variety of people there, like dudes with mohawks and like the studs and like spiked jackets, and then like teeny bopper girls with like a big smile, and like people with tattoos, and like people without tattoos. It's just a little bit of everything. Like, we have like old ass parents that are there like, yeah, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and then young ass kids, and there's something beautiful about that unity, and that's like a very spiritual music for me, and I love that. So listening to them and seeing them live, and like going through like all the, you know, adolescent depression, anxiety of being like a teenager, and like, you know, figuring out like, oh, this is the world I have to live in. Oh shit. What happened to that childhood bliss, you know? At least like seeing their music gave me like hope, and it was just listening to them. I was like, I want to do for others what they're doing for me. And that was like this thing that clicked with me. And so like from then on, like they were just kind of my, I guess like my guidepost, or just like the I don't know what to call it, but they actually just released another album. Just came out today, and John Frusciante, the guitarist that was with them in like their Meat and Potatoes years, like Blood Sugar Sex Magic in 1990 up until Stadium Arcadium 2006, he just returned after 10 years, and I listened to like all 17 songs and had a spiritual experience last night in my bed, and it's just absolutely fucking beautiful.
Amazing.
Just beautiful. So it's nice to...
That's cool.
Yeah.
So I think something to touch upon that I find interesting is how the application of music has, or at least the way it's unfolded, is now completely different in modern era, because when it was just on the radio or some sort of like vinyl, or it was very, you're just stuck in your head and visualizing whatever, you know, you can in your mind. And then with the advent of TV and screens, and then MTV actually kind of showing like music videos, and now like you have a visual to associate with the music, and now we're in this, I guess, like a post MTV world where there's other elements. Like you can now have video games, you can now have other interactive ways of kind of like experiencing music. So what excites you about that? Because I know that now unlocks a whole nother realm of musical, you know, development that didn't really exist, or wasn't something that was top of mind. You know what?
Something that I really love that exists right now: YouTube playlists, or just like this like movement of like lo-fi, chill hop beats, these kinds of things, and like they have that for everything. They have like old movies like sampled over it. They have like lo-fi hip-hop playlists for like video game music, which is
Vaporwave.
Super nostalgic. Vaporwave is super 80s. Like, it's so fun. It's so fun. And I think that really exploded during the lockdown, because people needed to chill. There's just so much doom and gloom going on like through the television set, that when you could really like get away from that, you could tap into peace and contentment at home and find your creative expression. And I think that was like a safe haven for a lot of people, if they were, you know, blessed enough to be in an environment where they could, you know, cultivate that. And like, you know, YouTube helped me big time.
So now what I find really interesting, specific to like the YouTube playlist and everything, is like, now that it's so fragmented and you can basically search for, like, there'll be a playlist for coding and programming and electronic chill or whatever. So it'd be very niche. Whereas before it was like these broad categories, genres, that it's like you just had to follow them. Right? And now there's so much blending and so much fragmentation within the genres that it's, on one sense, it's kind of liberating that you can go and search for it, but it's also tough to navigate if you're just entering the space and trying to, you know, figure out like, what do you like? So I think that how's been your experience kind of seeing the fragmentation of genres, and let's say if someone asks you what kind of music you play, how do you even begin to like form that identity?
Yeah, good question. I'm seeing that this like fragmentation, it just with globalization through the internet, and then the more that people around the globe have access to the internet, everyone has a creative capacity within them. And it's just about tapping into that and finding out like what aligns with you creatively. And there's so many musicians on the planet, and it's amazing that they can all put their stuff online and everyone can find a community or have like some people that come to them and like vibe with what they do and love what they do, and everyone can contribute what the special gift that they have to offer. And having like a open platform like that is a really cool way. So like it's interesting because the word fragmentation to me seems like a breaking down of, and it almost has like a negative connotation like in my head. And it almost to me is more like an emerging, or like a dissolving of a veil that was always there of like, oh, the only way to get your music out there is to be on radio. And that's like, oh, okay, cool. So we have like 20 artists at a time in America or something.
Yeah,
like that's I'm just like throwing a number out. But now it's whoever wants to create can have a platform, multiple platforms. There's so many platforms.
Yeah.
And like,
I think that the fragmentation has been positive in the sense that it's almost like unlocking the gatekeepers and unlocking those barriers to entry that a lot of musicians had, where you can be discovered.
Barriers to entry, good way
before
to put it.
It was, now you can. I would say that there was a point where when the advent of MySpace was coming out, there were musicians that were discovered through MySpace.
That's how the Arctic Monkeys got started.
Correct. Forgot what was the other one that was discovered by, I don't know if it was Jay-Z or Dr. Dre, but it was like, I can't remember them right now off the top of my head. But you had MySpace, started unlocking it through the internet. Now you have like SoundCloud, you have TikTok, you have all these other platforms that are now avenues and channels that people can discover that before it's just like the radio. Or like whoever.
And you needed to go through a record label, and they were gonna fuck you over, and they were gonna give you like a 360 contract and like take all your shit, and then you're gonna die of a drug overdose because of how horrible the industry is. You can still die of a drug overdose because of how horrible the industry is, but at least you can
have control.
You can also be like Chance the Rapper and like do your own shit and then get a Grammy for it, which is super cool. Not to say that the Grammy is always like a level of success that you require in order to be happy. Like, no, you can find happiness in your day to day, but just the fact that happened means that it's achievable. That anything's achievable.
Absolutely, yeah. And I guess since we were already talking about now this open kind of sea of discovery when it comes to music, I want to bring it back to identity and how where you're at in life right now is in an area where you're kind of reforming your identity as well, right? So you still have music at the core, but now you're exploring these other avenues. What can you speak about that? What do you feel is like your current state in this journey?
Yes, that's a great question. And identity is a very interesting one for me. I've been, let's see, how do I go about this? For most of my life, at least most of my adult life, I've been reading a lot of psychology books, spiritual books, and recently, so like last year, I would say that I started, let's say, what's the proper wording for this? Let's say my spiritual awakening. And that has a personal meaning to me. That's something that we can get into in another time. If anybody has any questions, they can reach out directly. But that has a very personal and profound meaning to me. And I started questioning a lot of things. And one of them is like identification and like noticing where when I was the front man and in Sun Ghosts and all the other bands that I was in, like what were the parts of me that were expecting certain outcomes and like attached to certain behaviors or like pushing away certain things that I didn't want and like protecting an identity that I had, and like how did that affect me and like damage the music that just needed to come out like that. And so I'm like putting myself more in a place of like spirit first, and then like everything that follows is exactly how it needs to be. So like as Nik Olas, which is just the name I'm going by. It's literally my first name with a space in between, which but I like the wordplay of like olas being waves, and I feel like life for me and in general is always like ups and downs, just like peaks and troughs and like these waves.
Yep.
And so it's just like it really makes sense. I love R&B. I love funk. I love rock and roll. I love classical music. I love jazz. I love like super chill, like meditation music. I love like African drumming. I love Middle Eastern music. I love it all. And so I'm like, oh man, where do labels like hinder this? And what can I put out and in what ways? And so I've been working more in like a collaborative aspect with certain artists. I think maybe from a place of, I don't know what my identity is right now, but I know that I'm a conduit for music. So whatever this person needs, I can be that for them. But now I'm starting to come into what is the message that needs to come through me. And it's coming in this form of like a mixture of rock and roll that I played for years and R&B and soul and jazz that I like, my heart has been like just loving and gushing for these past few years. And something that I found within this last year of my spiritual awakening, which is called medicine music, aka ceremony music. And in that space, it's kind of a broad term. It's pretty much like any kind of music that comes from either like Central or South America, usually specifically in the jungles, and like passed down orally through generations of like plant medicine ceremonies, ayahuasca, yahe, mushrooms, peyote, these kinds of things, but also from music from the East. So like kirtan and chanting from Hinduism, from India, and like Tibetan Buddhist mantras and things like that. So I kind of encapsulate all these like spiritual music like genres into medicine music, and literally the purpose of these songs is medicine. It's like acknowledging that music is a vibration, and at the quantum level we are vibrations, we are energy, and so music can literally alter us at the molecular level and heal us and move like these energies that might be stagnant and might be keeping us in a stagnant like negative state, I guess. Kind of difficult to put a lot of these things into words, and so I'm seeing my purpose being more like, how can I be more intentional with the music that comes through me, so that, and like going back to like what the Chili Peppers were for me, like, oh, this music heals me and makes me feel better, and I want to be that for other people. And I'm just like revisiting that path again, like, oh, cool, I want to be really intentional with this music. And I know there's like a stigma, and I've heard it a couple times, like, yeah, it's not really cool to like sing it in these words because it's like, it might be super hippie or lovey-dovey and like, you know, we're all one and all this. And I'm just like, the Beatles did it. Like when it resonates, it resonates. If it's coming from a place of like ego, like I want to heal other people, you know, like if that's, not to say if you talk like that you're full of ego. It's just, you know, it's my inner Jim Carrey making some characters, but it's like just tapping into, I lost my train of thought, but just tapping into like tapping into that purpose again, essentially, and reigniting that and mixing that with what I love. Because in the medicine music genre, there's a lot of traditional and like old lineage music. So it's like very, like, I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. And it literally sounds like it's of the earth, of Mother Nature, because of how ancient some of these songs are. But I'm seeing that there's like an accessibility thing, that if I could bring in the things that really like ignite my heart, like rock and roll and R&B and these genres, into a more with like a more intentional, like this song is to heal others because of like this thing that I've experienced and this has helped me, then like I can do that. And I think that would be really beautiful.
Cool.
Yeah.
So in this journey I feel like there's a lot of people that are experiencing some sort of like recalibration of their identity. People are kind of labeling part of the pandemic as like the great resignation because people are leaving their day jobs or leaving what they've been used to in their 9 to 5 to try and explore other avenues and rethink their careers and their life in general. So I think it's interesting to see a perspective that you're going through and other people are going in their own way. And I think a way also to frame this is to look back at what have you learned now that you wish you could have told yourself 10 years ago. Let's say it's an aspiring musician that's now 19 years old, 21 years old, and they're just kind of like they're tapping into this primal instinct of what's pulling their drawstrings of music and that influence. And so what would you tell them to kind of center them and give them a little bit more direction?
It's interesting because I see how, at least in my experience, everything that happened in my life happened exactly how it needed to. And so I can't say that I regret anything or that I would go back and change anything. But to play along, I would go back and just like tell myself, hey, just start sitting in ayahuasca ceremony now and don't wait another 10 years because like this will just get you like on the path quicker and you can do like some more work now.
Yeah. So and what was your experience with that and kind of like what did it illuminate for you?
It gave me my faith back. Gave me a sense of spirituality that I realized, at least in my personal experience, I came into the world with it. This sense of like childlike innocent. Well, it's not childlike. It is it's like human, being a child. It's just this sense of innocence and wonder and discovery and like literally like without any outside societal influence, a child looks at the world and sees beauty, looks at every other human and sees love and gives them love. And there's no discrimination, none of this. And it's just as society starts to set limitations and boundaries and like put us in a box and tell us you can't do this, men can't cry, women can't do this and all that, that's when you start killing the soul, and then the child kind of loses that thing. And I noticed that, with I guess this like philosophical scientific mindset from I guess like the last 300 years of like God is dead and this like throwing away religion. I like what Ram Dass says, where he says we threw the baby out with the bathwater, because in my opinion, in my experience, religion has, at least like Catholic religion for me, that's what I grew up in, has misunderstood spirituality and uses crime and punishment and judgment and guilt and shame, whereas spirituality is understanding complete unity of everything that is, and it is unconditional love. And it's like something I'm reading in this book, A Course in Miracles, which is fantastic. I recommend it to anybody that this might resonate with. But something I read today was, sin is the lack of love, and sin is a mistake to be corrected, not an evil to be punished. It's kind of like a very gentle parent, like teaching a kid, like the kid's like going to grab something that's like going to hurt him, like no, and just like gently moving the hand away, not yelling at the kid, because if you yell at the kid will get traumatized, and then like it's like there's a little bit of violence involved with that. But it's just this gentle, like no, it's okay, that's a mistake to correct, not an evil to be punished. This kind of crusader mentality, this us versus them. So I just went on a rant. I have no clue what the initial question was.
It's definitely. I'm the one that basically tapped into it because I was trying to find out, what the source of what drew you to doing it, and what your experience has been like, which I think is important for other people to listen to. That either have thought about it or have never even experienced someone else speaking to them about what that experience is like.
I'd love to share one more thing, because you just said what drew me into it, and I would like to share that. So in the last band I was in, Sun Ghosts, the band was very successful locally, and we went on tour a few times, and absolutely lovely, and everybody involved. Like, I was just so blessed that I had that experience. And around 2017, my dad got diagnosed with cancer, and I fell into a pretty deep depression, and like my energy level and commitment with the band started to peter off, and it was kind of a difficult thing to balance. And then I got into a relationship shortly after, and a lot of relationship anxiety from the past, because I hadn't been in a relationship for like 5 years for that reason, started coming up. So I was like holding depression and anxiety at the same time, and then the band started to like disappear and like kind of peter off, like that's the best way to put it. And then lockdown happened, and it just threw me into the depths of like that depression and anxiety, and I was just coping. It was all escapism and numbing, and like it was just really dark. It was a really dark time for me, and I kept trying to like build myself back up, and it felt like a kid building his foundation on like a sand castle, and then every time I'd get back up into the world, like a wave would come and just wash it all away. And it took me weeks, maybe even months, to like build that back up. And I got to a place in like early 2021 where I just, for the first time in years, just dropped to my knees and I prayed, and I just asked, like, please, universe, like send me, like just guide me. Like I can't do it. Like I'm trying, I keep trying, I can't do this. Like I don't know what the fuck to do. Like please help me. And it was just in like the next week that an offer for ayahuasca ceremony just came up. And I was like, yeah, let's go. I took it. And then the rest has just unfolded like that. But I just wanted to mention that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Nice. So we move into more of wrapping up and
for sure
moving into this aspect of the learnings that you've had and the insights you've gained over your journey of being a musician. Are there any salient, lessons that you can really pull from? Is it kind of, I think a lot of them you've talked about diminishing and letting your ego down, right? And putting yourself in a position where you allow whatever to come your way and take it at its core value, and not necessarily having all these judgments and so what are some of the insights and learnings that you've gathered over these
I think a powerful thing is vulnerability in general. Vulnerability in the society, in like Western society, like structure, has been labeled as being weakness and the thing that we should avoid at all costs. And I argue the opposite, that vulnerability is strength in being able to show ourselves completely and be completely honest with who we are. And I think that that's what people want right now. They want to see others exhibit that so that it allows them to be that. And when we get into a space of vulnerability, that's when we can like really share and really heal. And so like being on stage and being like a front person of a band, or being in a band in any regard, and like any kind of artist, if you're vulnerable with what you're going through and your experiences, like it's okay to like put on this persona and like, oh, here's my character, like when I get on stage. But if you're like just putting another mask on, it's the same thing that this society has known. Like maybe what people need and want is no mask. You can still like dress up and have fun. There's nothing wrong with that. But just like bring yourself to that. And I think that's something.
Awesome. Cool. Usually I end up asking all the guests if they've been consuming any kind of books, movies, or any recommendations of things that they've been watching or like,
Let's see. Books. For the real spiritual seeker, there's a book called A Course in Miracles that I highly recommend. For someone who maybe like spirituality still might sound like hocus pocus or mumbo jumbo to them, I recommend Joe Dispenza's book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Joe Dispenza healed his own back with meditation and visualization, where the doctors told him that he'd never walk again. And that book, the like 80% of it is all science. And he he goes into like quantum physics, which is not hocus pocus. Like this is real shit, and where those scientists are finding out now, like, oh, the quantum realm is essentially proving what like ancient like Hindu like yogis have been saying for like 5,000, 10,000 years, and it's like correlating with that. So that's a really, really cool way to like bridge that scientific Western mind with Eastern spirituality and seeing like where that like meshes together. So as for like movies and things to watch, I'm not haven't really seen anything in a bit. I've been watching Gaia TV a lot, which is like all along this like more esoteric like channel.
Mm-hmm.
And then music, yeah, check out that new Chili Peppers album. It's beautiful.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. I actually was listening to the new Denzel Curry album on the way here.
Oh, how is it?
It's cool because he's so wide ranging in what he brings to the table, and I really like that. I'm halfway through it, so having gotten the full scope, but from the tracks that I've listened to, I really like it.
Cool.
And in terms of I just started watching a show called Righteous Gemstones. Ooh. Which is talking about like these mega churches, and it has like these characters that some of them are more familiar. It has Danny McBride, which is from Eastbound and Down, and it's hilarious. He actually created it, and he brought in some other stars into the mix that are really funny. But it's humorous, but it also has some elements of truth of like there's obviously these people that are taking advantage of religion in insidious ways, but adding humor to it to at least bring light of it. But yeah, and other than that, where else can people follow you? Where can they get in touch with you?
Like my main method, my main like avenue is Instagram, and it's Nik, which is spelled Nik. So nik.olas.music. That's it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well,
thanks for having me, John.
No, I appreciate it.
This
Thanks
is
for
awesome.
coming on.
I'm like still like shaking from the Cuban coffee. I'm like, oh, I haven't had that in a minute. So like
that's amazing.